right, this is Rich Bendixson from Dashboard Gear, and I think we're about ready to get started here. I am going to be recording this, and if you do have questions, feel free to use the chat and the QA facilities. WebEx changed their user interface on me here, so I'll try and navigate through that as we go. Topic today is financial reporting for Infor, and I'm going to cover a variety of topics, and some of those are Dashboard Gear specific, some are general, but if there's anything in particular you have, feel free to ask. My name is Rich Bendixson, and I've been doing reporting in the Infor space, Lawson, for almost 30 years now, so a long time. I am the founder of Dashboard Gear. We have about 200 customers that are using our products and our services to do their reporting on Lawson. We were founded in 2007, and we have two different parts of our solutions that we offer. The first is a set of packaged applications, and I'll talk through some of those and what those different pieces are. And then the second piece are consulting services, and that's a growing portion of our business as well, where we just do generic reporting and business intelligence consulting, everything around data services as well, and I'll get into some of those specifics. We got a large number of you on the call today. A good amount from Infor is on, as well as another company called Burst, which is part of Infor that I'll get into here in a little bit. So we'll cover all the different tools. Now, our services that we offer aren't specific to any particular products. It's just everything generic, reporting and business intelligence that I'll get into. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is just what products we offer from a product perspective. We have a number of what we call connectors. Some of you know them as our data marts, and we're kind of changing the name because of the purpose and some of the confusion that's out there. So a lot of you existing customers have what are called our Infor on-premise data marts, and we have those for S3 and the GHR. We also have those for Kronos, which is at the bottom of the list, or near the bottom of the list anyway. And what that does is it basically creates a data warehouse / data mart out of your Infor data so that you can unlock the full potential of your reporting tools that you're using. And I'll go through more of that as we go. And then a growing segment is as they move to the cloud, we have two other types of connectors. We have a single-tenant cloud connector for those of you that move to a single-tenant cloud. And then we've got the Cloud Suite connector, which works with the single-tenant and multi-tenant as well. So we get that question a lot as far as, does it work with multi-tenant and so forth? And the answer is yes. It's a different flavor of our connector that we have because we have to connect to it in a different way. For those of you that aren't real familiar from the technology perspective, when someone talks about single-tenant versus multi-tenant, what it comes down to is in a single tenant, you have your own database and your own data. Multi-tenant, you're sharing that with others. So you technically can't just say, I'm going to query the database because you don't have access to the whole database because it's got other people's data in there as well. So we go through a different connection mechanism so that you can see your specific data on that. And then we have another product, the Kronos Connector. So those of you that use Kronos, we also have an out-of-the-box connector for that. And what that does is it gets a time card data and scheduling and any data that you keep in Kronos. And then they can work together. You can connect the Infor data with the Kronos data and so forth. And then the last product we have is what we call our SSRS Data Distribution Toolkit. And that's for those of you that use SQL reporting services to do reporting. It filters the data so that people only see what they have access to see. And so that's kind of a combination of our products. Service-wise, we get into different implementation services, so LBI and IBI. We do report writing. We've got a lot of that, so any of you that have any report writing needs, we can help you out there. We are a new Infor Burst partner. Again, we were at one time, and then we weren't. Now we are again. So we're a Burst partner, and we can do those implementation services as well, and would love to help you with that. And I'll go through more of those specifics here in a little bit. And then one that for the financial folks, we have an RW100 conversion. service. And this also has a conversion toolkit piece of it, which is a piece of software that we use to assist in that process. So many of you have libraries of RW100 reports that maybe you want to move to Burst or a new reporting platform that's more SQL-based, Tableau or Power BI or whatever you want to use from that perspective. And we have a product that assists in that migration. So if you've got, a library of RW100s, rather than figuring out how you're going to do that, we can run it through our process and it'll convert it to more of a traditional SQL-based, using all your account groups and lists and views and all of those kind of fun things. We'll do that. It also does the formats and the different row files. So however you've rolled those up, we can bring that over and leverage that as a starting point for you. And then it talks about Crystal to Burst IDI conversion services. LBI is going away, and I know a lot of you that are on the call are on LBI. And when you go to Cloud Suite or version 11, that no longer will be a piece that's in the mix. And so you can choose to continue to use Crystal on your own for that, or we can help you with that conversion process. And I know many of you have that. Our consultants are very versed on all of the LBI, IDI, as well as the new products, and so we can help you on both ends of the spectrum, where you're coming from and where you're going to. And then one we've been doing a lot of lately, just because many of you are trying to strategize, is on the BI reporting assessments. So taking inventory, where are you? Where do you think you want to go? Talk a little bit about your strategies, and then help you make a game plan to get there. And that's the part I enjoy doing the most with folks, and that it kind of gives a vision of where you're going and what you want to accomplish, and we can definitely help you do that. And then just kind of the grunt work data services, which we get into massaging data, and a lot of it's with the bottom point of just integrating third parties, whether it be Epic data for you healthcare folks, or one that for whatever reason has been popping up a lot lately is API from a time card, kind of like the Kronos piece. iSIMS, which is recruiting. We do budgeting systems. Data integration services is a popular topic, and we have the staff to help you with that. Now, so what I'm going to do is go to the next slide. The questions I get on our products a lot is, where do we fit in? So I said the term connectors a lot, and the data mart and so forth. And what we do is we basically sit between whatever reporting tools you want to use and your Infor Kronos data, and whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. We have a connector, or a piece that connects your reporting tools up to the data that you have stored out there. And so, the question I get a lot is, does this replace, how does it compare to Burst, or how does it compare to IBI, or how does it compare to that? It doesn't. It works with those tools. So it's not an either or. It's we help those products do a better job of getting at the data. So, it's not a competitive thing at all. It's a complementary thing. And so what I did, just to kind of cement that in, many of you probably had demos of the Burst. This is Burst architecture here, slide that they present, and, how we position it. And it's got a whole slew of great tools that sit on the front end, whether it be mobile services and dashboards and all that. It does an awesome job of that. And then it's got analytics and reporting layers and so forth. You'll notice I put dashboard gear in a couple places on the slide. One down here in the data layer, and then the other one over in the IT-owned data. We plop that into a Burst environment in a couple different ways, and really what that does is it unlocks the full potential. You can use Burst to its fullest on top of the dashboard gear connector that's there. And I'll go through a bunch of examples of why you'd want to do that or how that helps. But if you can think of a reporting tool, and I know a lot of you have Crystal, so I'll use that as an example because you probably can relate to that a little more. You go to do a Crystal report. Many of you have that, but you either have difficulties writing those reports, and part of the problem with that is you have to get at the data, which means you have to understand everything there is to know about how do I join GL chart detail to GL chart sum to GL amounts to GL system you go through the whole process of all the tables. You have to understand those as well as the technology that's there. what we do at Dashboard Gear is we take care of that heavy lifting for you, and so you just tell Crystal or whatever tool you're using that I want to connect to the Dashboard Gear general ledger system, and it will give you that data. Now, how we do that is on a periodic basis, we read that database that's on the, and still labeled loss in here, I should say Infor database. We read that data and we transform it into more usable data sets, and we put that into what's called a reporting data mart. We also generate a library of analysis services cubes and put those out there, and I'll get into what those differences are here in a little bit. But by putting it into those two formats, you then connect your traditional reporting tools up to those things where the data has been simplified down for more typical use cases. Now, the reason that we put it into two different formats is there's different reporting scenarios. And so, for example, I'm out doing a needs assessment here this week at a customer where we're going through and evaluating what their strategy is going forward. And there's many types of reporting. You have reporting that you do to create standard reports that you send out to all your line managers. You have month-end, P&Ls and financial statements. You have reconciliations that accountants are doing. You have the type of queries that people do when they get asked, what do we spend on legal fees last year? Ad hoc kind of questions. So the different types of analytics and reports that you do require different types of tools and different types of data. And the reason we put it in these two database types is they tend to handle both of those very well. The OLAP cubes are really good at ad hoc reports as well as high-level summaries. So if you want to know, what we spent in legal fees last year, a cube works great on that. Whereas our reporting data mart has all the details behind it and all of the other pieces of data that you need to create all the other types of reports that people traditionally do, maybe an invoice listing or, a trial balance or a P&L, that kind of thing. All of that is in the reporting data mart. Now, some of those you can do either way. So I mentioned P&L. That's probably summarized enough. You could do out of a cube, or you could do out of the reporting data mart. They're in both places. So it really comes down to just finding the right fit for that. Then on top of that, you place the right tool. So whether or not you're doing analytics or, a picture-perfect report and the designer of burst for doing a report or a crystal report, that kind of thing, you pick the tool that matches to the right type of data that's there. So that's kind of the process you go through. So the first thing is kind of recognizing there's different types of reports, and then taking an inventory of who's going to get those reports and how you're going to work with those. And that's kind of the distribution aspect of it, which I'm not going to cover much in today's call, but that's an important part of it as well, is being able to identify who can access that data and who's going to be seeing those reports. All right, so that's kind of an overview of that. This was just a slide we had done a while back surveying customers of what they're using. As you can see, people are using all kinds of tools. I'm not going to focus in anymore on specific kind of report writing tools on top of it, but just know that you can use a whole variety of things just depending on what's there, whatever you're comfortable with and your staff skills are, and maybe what your goals are going forward, and we can help you with that. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, it says demonstrate Excel and Crystal. I'm not actually going to demonstrate Crystal. I'm going to demonstrate some other things, but hopefully that all makes sense. I'm just going to pause for a second and just see if there's any questions that have come in. I do not see any questions, but if you do have any or any specific thing, feel free to put that out there and I'll do that. Now what I'd like to do is just kind of highlight some of those differences. Some other things I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk a little bit more about hierarchies, reporting hierarchies, alternate chart of accounts, KPIs, some of those things. But before I do that, I'm going to jump over here to this report writing tool that you all probably know very well. It's Excel. So no matter what you're doing, usually you have to support Excel from a report writing perspective. The nice thing about Excel is it has the ability built into it to connect to analysis services cubes. You can also connect it to the SQL tables. But I'm just going to point it at the analysis services cubes, and this will highlight maybe a use case for why you would want to use a cube for ad hoc type reporting. Now in dashboard gear, we have probably 30 or so different cubes as part of our library, and it's going to vary depending on the modules that you have, whether you have finance or supply chain or HR. But today we're talking about just finance, so I'm going to go to the data menu. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get external data from an existing connection, and I'm going to go to a general ledger summary cube. Now we have summary cubes and we have detail cubes. And if you remember what I mentioned earlier, what cubes really do good is summary type data or ad hoc. So I'm going to show the summary cube. This is my favorite cube and the one actually that I think is the best fit for what's here. And that is taking your general ledger data, that's amounts and units and budgets by account and period and account unit. So basically financial statement type data that you can put in here. And what it does in Excel is it creates a pivot table on that data. And so how you work with it is at the top of the list in a cube are what are called facts or measures. And the measures in general ledger are things like actuals, budgets, year-to-date amounts, period end balances, that kind of thing. So what you do is whatever amounts you want to work with, you can just drag down the values and it'll show over here on the left. You then can take the different values and filter those or group those, and these are called dimensions. So what you do is you take the different dimensions you want to look at, maybe by fiscal year, and you can say, I want to see this for 2009. I want to see it by account or account unit or whatever it happens to be. So I can go to my accounts dimension. I'm running off my laptop here, so it's a little bit shrunk. So I can go to my accounts dimension, and I can see things either by what's called a hierarchy, which is a roll-up, or what's under more fields, we can put any values that you want that make sense, whether it be the account number or the description or the full account description. Any individual piece of data can go under more fields. But I'm going to take this hierarchy just so you can see what that looks like. And what the hierarchy does is it takes your chart of account name. So there's one called master in this case, and I can click on it. And it's going to go through all the different summary levels you have of your charts. So I could go down through payroll expenses and medical and salaries and wages. You know, I can keep going. However deep your chart of accounts is, you can drill down and see the values. But what's nice about a cube is anything that's a dimension here, you can relate the data. So right now it's looking at 2009 by my accounts. And if I wanted to see by periods across the columns, I can take and put that on the columns. So it allows me to relate any dimensional data to other dimensional data using a pivot table. So all of you that are accountants on the line, which is a lot of you today, you're able to take and look at the data, slice it up, use it however you want to do using Excel. Now you can do the same kind of thing using the visualization tools of Burst and Power BI and Tableau and all that. It works great there. What it doesn't do a good job of, though, no matter what tool you put on top of it, is a lot of detailed reporting, and that's because cubes, the way they store the data is not optimized for that detailed reporting. If you noticed when I was in here, when I grabbed, actually I'm going to put a mount back on there. When I had a mount on here, and I'll take off periods and I'll take off accounts, it had the grand total. The way a cube works is it's really optimized to come at the data from the top down. So normally when you've been doing reporting in the past, you probably have hooked up, I'll keep banging on Crystal just because I know the big percent of you have that. You'll take Crystal or something like that. It's got all these details, and you go through great pains to figure out how do I summarize that data or how do I get it rolled up or filtered. In a cube, it comes at it from the opposite direction. Everything is already pre-aggregated, and all I'm doing is breaking it down. So things that are summarized tend to come at it a little bit faster and better from the top down rather than from the bottom up. And that's really the fundamental difference between the two. And so when people ask me, should I use a cube to report on something or a data mart, the answer is you do need both at different times, but the thing that pushes me one way or another usually is the amount of detail that you want to put on that report. If you're putting a lot of details on that report, usually it's better off of the relational reporting data mart. If you're not putting a lot of details on the report and it's summarized, then a cube is a good way to go. So that's usually the first kind of question I use to kind of break that down and point you in the right direction. So hopefully that gave you a good picture of cubes and what they can offer. This is the general ledger summary cube. You can do, just to kind of hammer home on one more, I'll just show an AP cube. We have cubes for activities and accounts payable and some of those other modules as well, but the process is the same. So like if I'm looking at AP summary data, I want to look at AP data. We have data that's AP distribution, AP invoice summary, so forth, different topics. You can think of a cube as like a model that brings together the related data for that topic. I can see the total invoice amount, let's say, for a particular date. So I can find a invoice date here. Should I have my other monitor? So I'll do invoice date on the filter. And I'll say I want to see all the invoices for 2008, let's say. I don't have too many, $16,000 worth. See if there's more in 2009, just like a little more in 2009. Once you have that, then you can break it down. Now you'll notice it says invoice details. I can still get to the details in a cube. It's just it doesn't do a lot of them very well. So for example, I could take vendor name and put down here and it'll show me all the vendors. I could then go up to the invoice details and say, show me all the invoice numbers for each vendor. And so it does have down to the invoice and so forth for that. So you can still get at it. It just doesn't do a real good job if you've got thousands and thousands of lines. I know Microsoft, which is the company that has the analysis services service that the cubes are running in, they usually recommend that you don't have more than 10,000 cells returned to your result set. Doesn't mean it can query more than 10,000 rows. It just means what it returns back shouldn't be more than 10,000. So that's kind of a ballpark they use as a guide to say you're finding a good fit for the data that's there. So something like this, it works fine whether you're querying for a specific vendor or a specific activity on the activity side or accounts, that kind of thing. But you wouldn't want to list every purchase order, let's say, for 2016 in a report. That wouldn't be a good cube fit. All right. So I'm going to just pause for a second and just see if there are any questions at this point. Okay, so there we go. There's one that came in regards to joining across cubes. Depending on the tool you're using on the front end, you can do different things to join across cubes. By default, the cube has a model that's around specific predefined relationships. So right now I'm looking at the AP invoice cube here, for instance. And so when we deploy this, what we do is we deploy what's called our base model of our application first, which is we take kind of the common things that everyone has wanted. What happens is when we started to deploy it previously, we would ask people what you wanted to see. Everyone would say, well, what have you done for everyone else? So that's kind of what we put into this base model. It's just the starting point. We then show you that starting point and say, okay, what's it missing? What do you want or not want? So in this case, anything that you can relate directly to an invoice is what we put into this cube. So you can do, the payments and the vendors and all of that kind of thing is in here. If it doesn't go in that cube, you're going to be at the mercy of the tool you're using, whether or not you can query across it. So maybe in this case, you wanted to query the purchase orders that was in this. We could either add that into the cube, which we do as part of our maintenance, or you can use Excel to write some formulas to do it, because that's its method for querying across cubes. So like if I click into one of these cells in Excel, I can say equals cube. And this gets a little advanced, but there's some cube formulas, so cube value, cube member, and so forth. You can say, I want to go out and get this value out of the purchase order cube related to that. So you can cross cubes using formulas in Excel. Other tools, it has the ability to link the different cubes directly together using their data layers to make that kind of connection between it. So Burst, for instance, has the ADR and the different data layer mapping, modeling within there that you can relate data. And they all kind of have a method of doing that. So you are at the mercy of the tools of what they do and how they do it to relate across cubes. But from a maintenance perspective, into our models that we put it in the cubes, we'll put into each one of those whatever data you have in your Infor system that makes sense to do that for. So that's just all part of the maintenance. So I now want to move over to another type of reporting first, so you can contrast this cube reporting with a little more detailed reporting. And so there's a few different ways to go, and I wrestled with what I was going to do on this, and I ended up falling back on what I'm most comfortable with at this point, and that's SQL reporting services. And we can also do Crystal on that, but I wanted to keep something on my laptop due to the nature of the connection that I'm at here. So what I'm going to show you is a local version of SQL reporting services with reports. Now, if you have detailed type reports, you can do something like, I'm going to actually show up. I know it's a financial one, but I'll show supply chain just because I think it's a little bit more summarized to show. If I go ahead and I run this report, what this did was it queried our relational data mart, and it showed a number of summary statistics. But what we do in our data mart is the tables are connected in such a way that it facilitates going from one set of data to another report, open PO lines in this case. I can click on a PO and it'll go to the PO details. I can click on a requisition. It'll go to the requisition details. So you can connect the data from one system to another. And on the financial side, I know that's a very important use case. And one of the examples I have, and the reason I showed supply chain first, it had some color and some charts to it, so it was a little more exciting than this demo GL transaction drill. What this one does is it basically, for a date range and an account unit and account range, it's taking general ledger transaction data, so GL trans, and it's got all the account units and accounts on here for that. But if I go down to like account 5021 here, this is medical surgical supplies. It has accounts payable 2,000. A common use case I know we run into is people want to say, I want to take my GL trans, but I post all my AP data summarized. So all I ever see is summarized transactions. Or I have RNI entries for received not invoiced, any of that kind of thing. What we do as part of our process that we run is we replace all those detailed summarized transactions with the subsystem details behind it. So it explodes out that detail so that when you're writing a report, you have the details for that. So in this case, it's $2,000 to accounts payable, and here's the invoices that make it up. And there again, because we have the details for that, it's very easy in the different reporting tools to link, that detail to the invoice detail for it, and then I could keep going. I could go to the PO and rec just like I did on the other one. So the key is we're taking those details and we're putting those in there. So rather than you trying to take your report writer and write a report directly on Lawson, which I'm going to say Lawson instead of Infor in that case, you could do that same report, but you would have to go through a lot more hoops and it would not perform as well. So that's really where Dashboard Gear comes in, as we massaged it in such a way to facilitate that type of reporting easier. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a report on the fly and use that as a basis to kind of talk about some things. So in this product, and each product's a little bit different how you'd create a report, but in here to do a new report, I'll just say new report, and it's going to walk through their report writing tool, which is they call Report Builder, being Microsoft. So then I'm going to say I'm going to do a new table report. I'm going to do it from a data set. I got to shrink my screen so I can get to the next button here. So I'm going to do next on the data set. We're going to do a finance report. Make sure I can connect. And in that finance report then, this tool is going to walk you through a series of tables that you can connect to. And this is going to be the example table I'm going to use for this report, GL by period. So one of the things we do as we're bringing the data over and making that connection is we have all the base tables in Lawson, but then we start adding additional tables to it. And one of the tables I use a lot for financial reporting is called GL reporting by period. And what we do to that table is we denormalize the data, which means kind of pre-join it together so that You as a report writer don't have to know how to do that. So for example, at the top of the table here, it has company, and that's the company number. We have the company name, and we have company full name. So company is the number, the name is the name, and the full name is a combination of those two. And you'll see that down here for account and account name and account full name. We do that throughout because so much of the reporting process that you go through is joining one table to another just to get descriptions and so forth. So we pre-join that data together. The other key thing we do is we try to flatten the data as much as possible, because one of the challenges that comes to reporting is data that is stored as individual transactions or lines. So let's say you're looking at, let's say account 1000 is cash. Well, cash is a current asset, and a current asset is an asset. They roll up. Well, a lot of times on reports, you need to create those roll-ups. So what we do in this table is we also flatten out all the hierarchies. So chart level 1 with its name, its sequence, and so forth. Chart level 2, its name and its sequence. So we have all the different summaries. So if you want the total of all the current assets, you just say where chart level 2 name equals current assets, and it will filter down the report to just that. So that's another key ingredient of making an easy-to-use reporting table. And then the third thing that's really the key is we pre-aggregate the data for you. So we have amount, we have prior period amount, we have prior year amount, year-to-date amounts, period end balances, all the budgets. So what we're doing is we're taking those amounts and we're pre-calculating and pre-aggregating them. So what that allows you as a user to do is just pick the fields that you want with those values without having to figure out, how do I make the formula to give period and balance? So those of you that do period balance sheets, for instance, you know that there isn't a period end balance in Lawson. So what we have is we already have that pre-calculated, so you just say, I want the period end balance. And I'll give you that data. What I'm going to do is, for my example report, I'll just create a simple account listing, but I'll just say I want to see all the account full names, which is the number and the name, and I want to see that by, those were the account levels. We also have the account unit data, so I want to see it by the account unit level, and I want to see the amount of that, maybe the year-to-date amount of that, and so forth. Whatever fields you just start walking through and doing. Now, I didn't have to join, in this case, GL names to GL chart detail to GL chart sum to GL system or GL amounts. There's a whole bunch of them. The typical financial report is about 12 joins, and I didn't have to do any of that in this because it's got all of that. In addition to it, it pulls in any account unit or account attributes, and I'll get into those here in a little bit as far as hierarchies and filtering and so forth. So we bring those in as well. Now, if there's anything else you want to join, you still can. We're not stopping any additional joins. So all of the capabilities you've always had are still there. But in addition to that, we just simplified that down and made that easier for you. So you pick the fields, and then in this tool, in most of them, the next step in the process is usually adding the filters. So maybe I just want this for company 1. So I can just say company is 1. Or I can add another filter into this and say I want this for a particular fiscal year. But in this case, I'm going to make it a parameter. So it's going to ask me for the fiscal year. And I'll add another one for what period am I going to do this for. So I can pick the period, and I'll make that a parameter. And then I usually add one more filter on here, which is chart section, which if those of you that know Lawson, a chart section says, do I want balance sheet accounts or P&L accounts? I'm just going to say I just want P&L accounts, so I'm going to say chart section is 2. So I'll hard code that in, but that can be done a lot of different ways, but that's the way I choose to do it on mine, is just say I want P&L accounts for company 1. And then fiscal year and period, I'm going to let the system ask me for those, and that's what a parameter is. Now, when I do next, it's going to allow me to lay that out. So I want to see the amount, the year-to-date amount, and actually I'm going to put the account. And the way this works is it's just whatever's on the detail row is what goes in the values, and then I could put account units down here on the row groupings to kind of group them. So by account unit, I want to see all the accounts and their amounts. So then I just do next. And I can do next. And I'll just walk through. Now it created kind of a very crude kind of base starting point, but it was basically a table of all the accounts, the amounts, and so forth. If I go ahead and I run this, what it's going to do is it's going to compile that up. It's going to ask me, what period are you doing this account listing for? Well, I'll say 2009, and I'll say period 2. And I'm going to view that report. And that's just going to do a simple listing where it's got every account. This is every account unit is what you're seeing right now. And there's a little plus next to it because I told it to group it. So if I go under radiology, it's now going to show me all my accounts in radiology with what their amounts are. And I got it here. I should have sorted it or grouped it by something just to make this easier. But as you can see, I didn't have to add any groupings or joins or anything like that into my report. It already was done as part of that. So it's very easy to get those different amounts and put those out there. Now you could easily put this into a chart or a graph or use analytics tools like Burst on top of that, where you want to create different KPIs and so forth. Because you don't have to worry about getting at that data so much, it's there for you. It allows you to use what those tools does best, which is reveal those important things in your organizations that can help you make decisions. So I'm going to pause just for a second on that, just see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to use the chat or the Q&A facility, or want to see any specific examples. I love to do that on the fly, which Tom Zeidel, who's on our sales staff, is listening in, and he knows that that's what I like the most, is when I have to do something on the fly. All right. So the next topic I want to talk about then, since I'm not really seeing anything in here, is related to alternate chart of accounts. And that's a common question I get asked a lot because it's somewhat painful to have additional charts and reporting on the existing Lawson S3. And I just want to give you some different options that you have. Now, I know there's some of you on the phone that have done every one of these options, I'm going to tell you. So, because I've worked with all of you on this, but there's a few different ways you can go about it. And what I mean by an alternate chart of accounts is, let's say you've set up Lawson 15 years ago and all your numbers are one way. You really want to report on it a different way. One of the hurdles that's in place is you either have to go through a lot of gyrations using your reporting tool to restructure things, or what I like to do is create another chart that you look at the data by. And you have a few ways of doing that. One is you can create another chart right in Lawson. The advantage of that is you can use the user interface and the other tools in there to create those roll-ups and maintain them and so forth. So you have a method and a methodology to maintain that. Now what you do, but when you do that, is you basically use the same detailed chart accounts that are there. So when it posts to, I'm going to use account, well, here on my example that's on the screen, account 9090, pounds of laundry washed. In your new chart, you have to have that as a detailed level, but you can create whatever new summary levels you want. So maybe you want to roll that up to laundry statistics or whatever it happens to roll up to. You can create any new summary levels you want. But because you're doing it that way, everything is posted at that detailed number, and then what it does is it just rolls it up differently in the reporting tool. What we do at Dashboard Gear is we bring in whatever charts you've set up out there, so whether or not anything's actually being used. So like in this new chart, for instance, you don't actually post anything to it. It's just using those numbers at the detail level as the reference point for us to link and re-roll it up in a different way. So you can use the Lawson tool to build those that way. And that's a great way to go, and that's usually where I recommend people go to start with. Now, some of you are leery about doing that, or maybe you're on the reporting side and you don't have a lot of influence, or the Lawson team, or whatever it may be. You can do that same concept using a table outside of that, inside the Dashboard Gear layer, where it's a custom table. So what you can do in that case is we basically give you a template that you follow to fill out the different accounts, and they have your individual roll-up levels there. The advantage of that is you're really unlimited on the different things you can put on there, whether you want to call them regions or sites or whatever your different roll-ups are that you want to put in there. You're virtually unlimited on what you can do at that point. The disadvantage is there's not a way to maintain it other than just in a great big, like Excel-like generic table, unless we go through a lot of pain to build a custom screen to do that. And that's really the third way, which is build a custom app to do that. And we've done that a lot as well. So it just depends on which route you want to go. But those are three pretty good ways that you can create additional charts. Now, with the new Cloud Suite financials that are coming out, there is also additional roll-ups that you can do because of the way dimensions are being added. So there are additional options for those of you that are on the Cloud Suite financial side to do that. But the process of reading those in is pretty much the same. So that's alternative charts. So that's, I know quite a few of you that are doing that on here. And I know there's one on here that's actually combined two different companies using two different charts. And all we do there is just create a generic mapping layer between the two that bridges the gap. And once that's there, we can read it in either way. And then everything downstream is the same. All right, well, there's a question that came in. So can the alternate charts be included in the data marts for reporting? The answer is yep. Well, by default, we read in all the charts that are out there. So if you, whatever you add into Infor Lawson, we pick up into the data marts. So you may have a chart that's for board reporting. You may have a chart that's for GAAP. You may have a, a operational reporting chart. You can create as many charts as you want, and we'll pick those up. The key thing really there is just understand that at the detail posting level, you still have to have a way of accounting for all of the accounts to roll up in some way. So it's really just the roll-ups that are the unique thing at that point. All right. Okay. The other topic I want to talk about is that RW100 conversion. I mentioned it briefly in our services, but we do have an application that will help in that. So for those of you that do have a big investment in RW100, we have a process that will read those groups and those views and those lists, as well as the RW row files and the format files, and put those into the data mart so you can leverage that. So maybe you have certain combinations of account units and so forth. We can bring those across. And actually, it didn't show that on the cube. That's probably the easiest way for me to show you to see that. If I go back here to the just general ledger summary cube, and I click in here, you'll see actually down here, account group names, lists, company groups, so forth. We can pick up all of those. There's the account group names. Let's see if there are descriptions or anything different. A little bit, not much. And put those into the cube. So they work just like on the any other dimension, whether it be an account or account unit. It just becomes another data point that you can use inside the cube for filtering and grouping and so forth. So all of that becomes, leverageable and reusable going forward as well. So it's a great starting point to start to wean you off maybe some of those RW100 reports. All right. Hierarchies. And what I mean by hierarchies is more responsibility type reporting. So I get the request a lot of seeing things that, I want to see it by VP, by director, by manager, or, by region and state and so forth. Different ways of rolling up the data. You have a few options there as well. Attributes are a great way. So for those of you that aren't using account unit attributes or account attributes, you can add those into the Lawson system, and that basically are user-defined type fields, where you can say, I'll create an attribute for vice president, and I'll group and filter everything by that. If I go back here to this table, this is that GL reporting by period table. These are all attributes. So at the end of every row, you can see all the VPs, sub-account group, square footage, person responsible, and so forth. You can see those different items that are in here, and those are the different attributes. And so that's one way you can simulate kind of a roll-up or a hierarchy of the data. And by doing that, you can group it and filter it and so forth within it. The second way goes back to those custom tables. We have a methodology that we use to build in kind of a custom table for that, and that's popular as well. That does require some consulting on our from our point to do that. But if you do that, we can read those in there too. So you can either do it in the Lawson app, or we can do a custom kind of hierarchy that builds that in. And we can do some things too if you do have HR with it. A common thing is people want to merge together maybe their HR department or supervisor structure with their financials. We can merge those two together as well. So the real key thing is just having you define what your hierarchies are that make sense to you and where you want to consider that the system of record, with the key thing really being able to identify how are you going to maintain it. Because oftentimes people will have a way of doing it, they'll set it up, and then they forget we got to maintain all that every time someone comes or leaves. So maintenance is always a key part of that discussion. And depending on who you have in the room, you're going to get different opinions, I'm sure, on that one, because everyone always wants to roll it up their way, whether it be finance or HR or payroll or whoever. They all have their own opinions on that. All right. Now, KPIs, I just a bullet point that I was going to talk about KPIs, but really from a KPI perspective, that's a hard thing to do in a generic webinar like this, other than to reemphasize the importance of those and how the key thing for you to do with KPI, and KPI is key performance indicators for those of you that maybe haven't heard that term. The key thing there is to come up with a standard definition. So, for instance, in the meeting I was at here today with this customer, we had a long talk about FTE. What does it mean to be a full-time equivalency? And because they had probably 6 different definitions of how they were calculating what an FTE was. So they were doing revenue by FTE and so forth, but one person was doing it by taking the number of hours they worked and dividing it by a thing. One person was taking it by the FTE factor they had in their HR system. One was doing it by just every person was an FTE, so it was more like a head count. So the key thing on the KPIs is if you do go that route, take the time and document what you mean by each of your metrics that you're doing and what the definition is. And then broadcast that loud and far to everyone as far as this is how we define what that is. And that's really a key thing because then it'll start to catch on and it'll have meaning. Otherwise, things become very confusing from that standpoint. Now, from a dashboard design perspective with KPIs, there's a lot of different opinions and so forth on that. The best advice I can give there is to try to make the most obvious KPIs just be big numbers that stand out on your dashboard. So actually, I did a burst training. I was in a burst training a few weeks ago, and the person who did the training actually explained that I thought very good on what he says is a good dashboard, and that is if you have a KPI maybe off to the left, that's just a big scorecard type number that says, revenue per employee is 12,000. Make that the thing that jumps out at you, that one number. And then from there, all the other information is corroborating that number. It can be different data, of course, but make it quite clear as far as what the value is. Dashboards, a lot of people tend to make them far too busy and meaningless stuff. So, for instance, even in a lot of the ones I demonstrate, I go over here to the HR, for instance. I go in my HR dashboards. So don't hold this against me if you people have seen this and like this one. This one here, I put a whole bunch of data on it, but a lot of it is it's too much for an initial dashboard. So it would be better in this case to come up with what are those key things and why do you even care what the 3-year turnover trend is? Make it clear, is that good or bad? That's there. So rather than have a lot of busyness on it, and this example here was just to show people different types of charts and so forth you could do. That's why it's all on there like that. But rather than have all that, make it very clear and define very clearly what each of those items mean for that. All right, we have another question that's coming in. Can the account lists and accounting unit lists be included in the data marts or only accessible in the conversion? So the short answer to that is yeah, we'll put, they're all included as far as bringing into the data marts. The long answer to that is it's really hard to use generic account lists and account groups unless they're also tied to an RW report specifically. And those reports
to convert those as part of our conversion service. So to get the lists and the groups and so forth to show into the cubes, like what I showed you in that cube, that can be included. That's no problem. But to actually convert an RW100 report or to build a report that use those lists takes some manipulation that usually requires some consulting services unless you're very advanced at that. So it's kind of a two-pronged answer. Just getting them in the cubes is definitely included and you can do. So hopefully that answered that question. I don't know. I can't see who asked the question, so I can't get into your specifics, but if I can see who that was, I guess. Yes, Susan, that can be included. Now, the only thing on that you'll have to say on there is you want to make sure that they're labeled pretty good, because if you've got 1,000 of them, which you probably do, then it can get quite messy in that list if they're not organized in some way. So the more you can filter those down, and we can say just bring in the ones that, are labeled a certain way or some rule, it will make more sense in your list. All right. Okay, that's from a KPI and hierarchies, conversion, alternate charts. We talked a lot about reporting and versus cubes and putting that in there. And, that's really all from a topic perspective that I have planned today. And just emphasize that we'd love to help you out with your future strategy and hear what it is you're trying to accomplish, and maybe help you make a game plan as far as what tools you need to put in place and how we can help you in that process. So if you do have any of that, keep us in mind. I'm going to go to the last slide, which basically has our contact information on it. And as it's there, I'll just keep an eye out for any questions or chats or anything like that you want to do. We are recording this, and I'll put it out on our website, I guess, in the first part of next week. Should be out there. We are going to be at Inforum. We are not doing a booth this year. We have we will be doing some different classes and sessions, and we're trying to pull together a little mini user group discussion time as well. So if you do have any opinions on that, or if you're going to be there, feel free to drop us a line. Let us know what you'd like us to do. We have a meeting room reserved where we're going to do a number of free trainings and so forth again. So feel free to let us know that. And I put our contact information myself, as well as Tom, who many of you know as well. All right, I got another chat. Are you able to bring in cubes to MS Access? The answer is yes, you can. Now, with that being said, usually when I have people that are doing Access, I point them instead at our SQL reporting data mart because we also have a full star schema in there for that. And those of you that are technical might know what that is, but basically it's the way of organizing the tables, and Access works much better with tables. So it already has all the data you see in the cubes kind of broken out and set up that way. So it works out really well to bring in Access actually and work with the data. So definitely, but technically, yes, you can bring in the cubes as well to that. As far as implementation time goes, that really varies. Now, what I've said in the past has been about a week to do each module, so a week finance, week supply chain. And some of you that have done it, well, it took longer than a week. And the reason it's not really a week per se. From our standpoint, it's a week. But what we do, as I said earlier, is we put in that base install, and then we work with you ongoing to say, how do you want to finalize it out? What do you want to have added? So maybe on your account units, your left 4 digits are your region, and your right 3 are your department, or whatever it happens to be. We work through those processes with you after the base is there. So it can vary from being done in a week to being done in a month or so. So it kind of varies, but that's all standard. Our pricing is $30,000 per module, so $30,000 for finance connector, and that includes all the AP activities, general ledger, and that also is the services around implementing it, as well as your first-year maintenance is covered by that. So there isn't any additional cost. All that we ever charge extra for is if you want us to build additional reports or do some other custom consulting, some of those things, then we'll build that into the process. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay, well, I did get one just now that said, aside from finance modules, what others exist? So we have the full HR, payroll, GHR modules, so everything S3 as well as GHR and payroll and benefits from that standpoint. And then we have another module for supply chain, which includes purchase orders, requisitions, ICs, any supply-related type expenses. And then those modules can be glued together so that you can go from one to the other. So, for instance, going from GL to AP to PO to RQ, kind of throughout the system. Once you cross between finance and supply chain, if you've licensed them both, then they get put together and you can navigate between those. Or if you want to go from GL to payroll distributions from a payroll perspective, you can do that as well if you have HR and finance. So that kind of thing. But basically everything on the Infor stack we have there. So it says to buy the full suite, $90K. Yep, if you were going to buy all the HR, finance, and supply chain, it would be $90K to do the whole works. And that's the software, the installation, and the maintenance. So there isn't any extra cost. So it's pretty easy to get in and go from there. Thank you all for your time today. I appreciate that, and look forward to meeting you on any other future WebEx.